What is Pierre Poilievre's plan for Canada? To answer this, I've mapped out Canada's top 3 crises at the moment. I'll show you clips of Pierre Poilievre, in his own words, outlining his strategies. Then, we'll analyse whether these plans are just political promises or potential solutions. Starting with the healthcare crisis, Pierre states what he thinks the problem is with the Canadian healthcare system and outlines his strategy.
Announcing that a Poilievre government will work with the provinces to create a national, merit-based testing standard to license doctors and nurses within 60 days of applying. It'll work like this. There'll be one standardized testing system. Within 60 days of an immigrant or a foreign-trained Canadian applying to work in their profession, they will be able to do the exam and get a yes or no based on their competency, not based on where they come from. This will mean we judge our medical graduates based on their merits and abilities, not based on some bureaucratic system or based on where they come from. It will also mean a national license so that an Alberta doctor can practice in Nova Scotia if he should fall in love with a lady there and get married and move across the country. It will also mean that the standards will be the same for people born here as those who come from abroad. And it will speed up the licensing of our medical doctors and nurses in this country.
Pierre's plan sounds solid, but in my opinion, it would face a few challenges to implement and might only be a short-term fix. The reason is healthcare is under provincial control, so implementing a national standard would require cooperation from all provinces, which could be politically challenging. Secondly, there's a funding issue. Because the healthcare system is public, funding often comes through taxpayer money from both federal and provincial levels. Increasing the number of doctors, nurses, and healthcare professionals alone won't reduce wait times. Infrastructure would also need funding for the expansion of clinics, hospitals, and staff, which would further strain the already tight budget on healthcare. Increasing the number of doctors and nurses would also force associations to slash the wages of current professionals, leading to more political tension. Next, let's talk about the ever-rising cost of groceries.
Flour, let's say this flour originated on a Canadian farm. I don't know where it came from originally, but let's assume that it's Canadian flour from the field to the fork, okay? The farmer has to drive a combine and a tractor, right? The farmer has to dry the grains, right? That takes energy. The federal Trudeau carbon tax raises the cost of energy. The energy that it takes for the farmer to produce the food and for the trucker to ship the food. And that adds to the cost for everyone who buys the food. The carbon tax is now 14 cents a litre. Trudeau wants to bring the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre. That's going to raise gas prices, heating prices, and all the food prices. My common sense plan is let's axe the tax to bring down gas, heat, and grocery bills. Instead, let's incentivize technology to prevent and fight climate change. That is the common sense approach that we can use to lower food prices. We need to bring more domestic food production home to Canada so that we have more affordable food for our people.
Canada's grocery chains like Loblaws control food prices, not taxes. Food prices were already rising before the carbon tax. Global supply chain issues like the war in Ukraine affecting the supply of fertilizers, labour shortages in trucking and agriculture have a far greater impact than the carbon tax. Even if the federal government removed the carbon tax, provinces can still enforce theirs, like British Columbia and Quebec. Finally, the elephant in the room, the housing crisis.
Why is it that we don't have enough homes? It doesn't make any sense. We have 10 times as much land per capita as the next closest country in the G7. We have the second biggest landmass in the world, and somehow we have the fewest homes. Why? Because we have the worst bureaucracy. It takes 7 or 8 years to get a housing development approved. It takes 3 times longer to get a permit to build a home in Canada as it does in the US or the UK. And then there's the taxes on top of that. So Who do you think pays for that? You pay for it. Why is it that your landlord can raise your rent? Because he knows you can't go anywhere. Why? Because there aren't enough homes. If there were more homes and there were vacancies, you go to your landlord and say, hey, I got options. Either you're going to make my rent affordable, or the new apartment complex down the street is going to do it instead. I'm going to pack my things and leave, and I'm going to pay my rent to him. But right now you have nowhere to go because it's impossible for that competitor to build his place. So we have to get the bureaucracy out of the way and let builders build. We built fewer homes last year than we built in 1972, when our population was half the size. Our population was 22 million in 1972. It was 41 million last year. And we built more homes in 1970. It's just insane. So I will be slashing the bureaucracy to speed up permit, free up land. I'll take the GST off new homes so that people save when they buy, and we will build the homes that you can afford.
There is a slight problem with this plan. Just increasing supply doesn't magically result in affordable housing. The reason is developers build primarily for profit. Here's an example. After World War II, there was a huge demand for housing in the US, leading to mass suburban development. Developers like Levitt and Sons built cheap suburban homes, Levitt towns, but they were mostly sold to white middle-class families. Racial covenants and redlining kept black and minority buyers out, even if they could afford homes. The result? Lower-income buyers, especially minorities, were priced out of home ownership, and wealth gaps grew. The same happened in the 1950s. The US government pushed urban renewal projects, clearing slums to build new developments. Developers built high-end apartments, office spaces, and highways, displacing thousands of low-income residents. Without incentives or government regulations, developers will always build what's most profitable, not what's most needed. And as we all know, regulations are at the provincial and municipal level, not federal, leading to possibly more political tension to implement.